We're all Mavericks.
Welcome to Mamish Mavericks.
With your hosts, Maynard and Tov Breslow.
We're Olim and Gerim.
And we're also entrepreneurs and marketers.
October 7th changed everything,
including the way we do business.
This is the show that realigns your business and goals
with your values and people.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mamish Mavericks. Today, we're joined by Ilana Parach. Alana is the COO of Hoops for Justice. Thanks for joining us today, Ilana.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited for this one today. We're going to be talking mostly about what you do at Hoops for Justice. We're going to get deeper into juvenile justice reform, Tikkun Olam, and the program that you're working with at Hoops for Justice. But before we get into all of those things, we're going to start it off a little bit easier. Can you let our listeners know where you're based out of today?
Yep, I'm based out of Los Angeles.
Sweet. LA. My husband's from LA, so I like to say that I'm from LA by proxy, but I hail from New York. But basically, getting right into it, can you just tell me a little bit, like a gist about what you guys are doing at Hoops for Justice? What's this all about?
Yeah, so we're a pretty young organization. We did a pilot program before the youth prisons closed in Southern California, and it's an in-facility program now. We do an hour of basketball with the kids. We're now actually doing 2 hours of basketball and 2 hours of guided conversation and life skills and career skills development with mentors that include formerly incarcerated mentors. We, during our pilot, also did court advocacy and reentry work with the kids that went through our program, and we're hoping to scale and continue to do that on a larger scale. For now, we're really focused on refining our in-facility program. So that means we go into the juvenile halls, do that 2 hour of basketball and 2 hour of life skills.
Sweet. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's such important work, especially for the kids, and it's really from the heart work. Can you tell me a little bit more about you, Ilana, about your journey and what led you to start working for, or what led you to create Hoops for Justice?
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, and in the town that I'm from, I saw two very different justice systems. Where I lived, I never saw police patrolling. If there was police anywhere, that was like something horrible happened. It was a resort town where I'm from, and where I went to high school, it was a more diverse community, and the kids that I was friends with lived in communities that were heavily policed, where they were getting convicted for things that, in where I'm from, they would have been considered depressed and probably gotten therapy, and instead they were getting introduced to the justice system. And I saw some really biased policing. I had a friend who got 15 years for smoking weed on parole at 16. Another friend, I saw police go to his house, pick out, I think 4 or 5 different t-shirt colors. Red, they said gang color, blue, gang color, yellow, gang color, and he went back to jail. And there was a lot of that I saw that really inspired me to do this work. I just felt at the time really helpless because I was young, and being able to provide direct services to young people now has been super healing for me. I went to school to study political science, and I wanted to approach it from the policy side, but I realized from working with my co-founders who both as juveniles faced life sentences, when they went through the system, there was such a lack of services. And when we were a part of the Youth Justice Reimagined work groups, we were just sort of hearing about the current landscape and the services that existed in Los Angeles and thinking that we were going to tackle it from an advocacy perspective, but realized like people have to fill those gaps, and the more caring adults that these kids can be introduced to, the better their chances are not committing or being reintroduced to the system. So that's in a nutshell where that inspiration came from.
Sweet. Yeah, I definitely relate to the one thing that you said about your friend getting busted for weed at 16. My husband and I used to work in the cannabis industry, and we had a podcast in cannabis, and I heard so many stories about the war on drugs. And it's just unfair in the sense of cannabis. Cannabis is a medicine, and people really use it now for mental health, for anxiety, for chronic illnesses. And it's hopeful to see where the industry is going as of right now, but definitely back in the day, I'm also a victim of the war on drugs. I also got busted for weed at 18 years old, and it was just terrible. There's so much stigma going on towards cannabis. But I really love what you guys are doing. I think that especially with the inspiration coming from your need to pursue justice is because we're a Jewish podcast, it's such a Jewish value. In the Torah, it says, tzedek, tzedek tirdof. It means justice shall I pursue. And that sounds like where your inspiration came from. And I love that. I love that. What led you to Hoops for Justice? Tell me a little bit more about, you wrote one of your topics here is Tikkun Olam. How does that kind of play into Tikkun Olam, and whether it be identity with Judaism or Jewish faith, into what you're doing with Hoops for Justice and how it connects with Tikkun Olam?
Yeah, there's an Angela Davis quote, and she says, prisons don't disappear problems, they disappear people. And I think the idea behind Tikkun Olam, which means to heal the world, right? It's about healing what's wrong so that we're addressing the roots of the problems as opposed to just hiding them away, which we know doesn't work. And so there's been so much evidence that has proved that a community-based approach is more effective. And I'll add to that by saying I saw that for my own family. My mom worked in philanthropy. My dad's family has deep roots in the civil rights movement. His father was printing a Black Panthers newspaper from their basement when he was a kid, exposed police for falsifying reports against Black people. So it was instilled in me through my Judaism. I think going to Hebrew school, it's drilled into you that a lot. I grew up Reform, and we talk a lot about social justice within the temple. And also I was in Jewish camps, and that was a focal point of everything we did, social justice. And then at home, it was reiterated to me. Yeah, it's a huge part of my Jewish identity. It's a huge part of the work that I do. And I think it's an important core value to have to guide any actions that you take, because if you use that as a guiding principle, you'll always be grounded in goodness.
100%. I totally agree with every single thing that you're saying. I can also relate to growing up in a Reform background. My parents raised me Reconstructionist, which that whole element of Reconstructionism, their whole philosophy behind their temple is Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, social justice, fighting for people, fighting for rights. And especially myself growing up with two moms, they came out of the Pride movement from the 70s and 80s. And I grew up in a completely social justice home, like social justice, feminist, everything in my home. And part of my journey in Judaism was basically I made tshuva to Orthodox Judaism with still that heart of social justice, even though there were still some things that I was questioning and all these things. I think that if you grow up in an environment like that, it's with you forever. You always have to make your voice heard and fight for others and make sure that other people's voices are getting heard. And I can relate a lot to that.
My parents also, they met on kibbutz, which is obviously very
Sweet.
Communal. And my dad always instilled that sense of community. And he was constantly bringing in kids to the house that maybe were having a hard time at home, and he would do their homework with them at the table. Yeah, I think he was a really guiding presence in that principle.
Okay.
My parents' kibbutz was obviously very communal. And my dad did a really good job of keeping that feeling of the importance of community in our house. He was always bringing in kids who maybe needed some extra help or were having trouble at home and letting them do their homework at our place, or calling my dad if they needed anything. Same for family members. Maybe they needed some help in a moment, and my dad was the first person to volunteer. he's just, yeah, he's really, my mom also, they're both incredible and incredibly kind people.
Wow. And that's also, I didn't touch on this, but you said that your dad was what, publishing the newspaper for Black
Yeah.
Panthers?
His dad, yeah.
Oh, your grandpa.
Yeah, my grandfather.
That's incredible. That's big work. Yeah, I really love this theme of community. I feel like anywhere you go in Judaism, there's always that kahila community that is just so tight knit and important. Just as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about today, I actually had signed up for a meal train for somebody in our community who just had a baby. And I remember when we had our baby, every single day for a week, people brought me food. And it was just like, it's like a thing that like happens no matter who you are, what you're doing. If you're part of this community here and where we live, everybody knows. And then all of a sudden a meal train is set up for you. Like you don't have to do anything and there's just food at your door. And it's really, the climate of community, especially in Judaism, is just so perfect. It's so strong. And like I said, it's really part of being a Jew. It's part of having that, it's that value that really stays strong throughout whatever sect of Judaism you are.
At the start of life and at the end of life too, right? It's like when you sit Shiva, everyone comes in and brings you food and checks in on you. And yeah, I think that's a really good way to illustrate the significance of community in Judaism.
Jews helping Jews.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful, and I was over at a friend's house earlier today, and her son, I saw one person from our shul there sitting with her son, going over his homework, and that's also in the light of Jews helping Jews. But he has, other than being part of our kehila and being part of our shul, he obviously knows geometry really well, and he's sitting here with my friend's son and going over his homework with him, and it's just like incredible, like especially for children, right? If we help each other's children, there's even a stronger passing down that value because children see how important community is. And in the light of talking about children, can you tell me a little bit more, going back to Hoops for Justice and what you're doing, the work that you're doing there, can you talk to me a little bit more about juvenile justice reform?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in LA County around juvenile justice reform. Obviously, youth prisons were shut down, and they're trying to use a more restorative approach. And they're bringing in more community-based organizations to do programming, but also to take on some of the responsibility for the work. And I think the plan is to take that even further and to employ restorative justice models before kids are even sentenced, and to take some of the diversion away from where it is currently and put it into the communities. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Youth Justice Reimagine, but the Burns Institute put together a really comprehensive report that's illustrated what juvenile justice has looked like, and it took key stakeholders and they put together a roadmap for what a more community-based approach could look like. And that includes 24-hour community centers, yes teams that the kids approve of, and those are people that they're familiar with. And I'll bring it back to my youth and just say, even if I think it was traumatic to see adults in seats that we didn't know taking away kids that we did know. And a lot of the kids in our program still feel the same way. And I think the biggest trauma that comes out of it is like people are deciding what happens with their life. I have no idea who this person is, right? You're a young person, but you're still a person and you've had a whole life that has informed who you are, the decisions you've made. And a lot of their lives up until that point have been really laced with trauma. I'm obviously generalizing, but for the majority, for all of the kids that we work with, trauma has been a big part of their life, which is why they are being cycled into the system so often, or for long periods of time they're in the system. And they really want people to understand who they are as individuals and why they're in the situation they're in. And the first thing they tell us when we come in to do the work is, I'm a good kid. And it's just, they're desperate for somebody to believe them because they feel like everyone thinks they're a monster. Up until this point, the approach has been punitive. And I think also when you're providing, because they are providing care, right? In the juveniles, they're providing care for a lot of young people. But when you're doing it on such a large scale, like you have to think about liability. And so while a lot of the staff that's there are from the communities that these kids are from, and they went into it to help the kids. And there's some incredible staff people that work with the kids that we work with that just go the extra mile. They buy things on their own to do projects with the kids. I mean, there's some real heroes. But when you're doing like large scale childcare, you have to think about so much liability. And I've seen it in some of the orgs too, where it's like who the kids are as individuals get lost. And so what I like about Youth Justice Reimagined, and I've read it many times, but it's really comprehensive, and I'm not the expert. There are people that are experts in YJR that could tell you every detail of the plan. But the thing that I really like about it is it really puts who the kids are as individuals at the forefront, and it places them with people who, number one, are qualified, but number two, know them and know the circumstances. And I think that's really important. So I think we're going to see a lot of shifts in juvenile justice, what it looks like, and what approaches are used. And I'm sure it's not going to be as quick moving as some people want. It's maybe going to be too quick for some people. But I think it's inevitable that there'll be changes, and there have been changes made. And I also think anytime there's elections or anytime people are trying to shift who's in power, there's this tough on crime approach, or I think we've seen fear mongering a lot in politics. And so there's been like a lot that has been published around like smash and grabs and rise in crime and LA is really bad. But there was a report that came out saying there's actually been a decrease in crime. And that's happened many times. It's not the first time that's happened. Anytime there's a push for reform, there's this resurgence of fear mongering and a push for a tougher approach. So I think we're going to see a lot of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I had a thought here about one of the first things you started talking about was trauma. And trauma is such a heavy topic to talk about. And like you said, especially when people are working to bring reform, there's usually that on the heavy side of there needs to be more of a tough approach to things such as that. And hopefully in the light of when you're working with people that have trauma, especially children, you would hope that people understand that needs to be taken care of in a more gentler way. And we can only hope and fight as much as we can to make sure that happens in a gentle way. Obviously, I don't really know anything that's going on with the justice reform or juvenile justice reform that's going on in LA other than what you've told me. But my thoughts would be that people would have a little bit of a bigger heart when it comes to children.
Yeah, I think from what I hear from the side that sort of opposes these reforms, it's just coming from a place of like their understanding about what works. And I think it's hard for me to speak up on behalf of people who hold different views from me, but I think their understanding is like if you don't see consequences, then, or if you don't see harsh consequences, then you're never going to become a well-integrated member of society. And we've tried that for so long, and I'm from this. I understand things differently. I'm somebody who believes that punitive action has never been a good deterrent to crime, and it's not a good deterrent to crime, especially for young people. I think even there's just so much that we don't understand until our brain is fully developed. We can't assess
For sure.
like the same way adults can when we're under the age of 25 or 26. And I think that's a part of why there's been a push for reforms also, is like we understand how brain development in young people works better than we used to. And so they're trying to consider that in how they create policies around juvenile justice, which is super important.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm an adult and I sometimes still don't know what I'm doing. So there's that. But yeah, I'm definitely with the more, as a social justice pursuer like yourself, I think our hearts always want to go to having compassion and making sure that people are taken care of before ourselves. And like you said, in corporate positions, or people that are in corporate positions usually take what they like to call the easy way, which is usually the tougher way. So thank you for sharing that. I completely relate, and I hope that there's a more gentler approach to juvenile justice reform in the future. With Hoops for Justice, we're talking about strategies, right, and reform and policies. With Hoops for Justice, when we talk about strategies, what strategies have you and your other people on the higher levels used to grow your business or find funding or this and that? What are some of the best strategies that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we did as an org really early on is establishing our values. And it helped us guide how we hire. It helped us guide how we designed our program. And it helped us navigate really tough decisions. And then after that, it was understanding that we're still in the early stages and we have to be like lifelong learners. And so we take everything as a learning opportunity. We're all learning as individuals in our role. We're learning about the kids as individuals. And so we try to design our program in a way where we're factoring in who we're working with specifically in the cohorts that we have currently, and try to make sure that we can adapt it to what their unique needs are. So that's been really helpful. We are horrible at fundraising, so we're learning that all the time, and we're trying to refine that skill constantly. And we established our long-term vision really early on as well. And so we knew that we wanted to provide a continuity of care. We knew that a lot of these kids are going to see a lot of different organizations, and they're kids who have difficulty establishing trust with adults and people in general. And we have a really strong sense of urgency because our long-term vision is to provide that continuity of care. And that actually helped us as a team come out of our own pocket a lot of times to make things work. Or we were working full-time jobs doing this at night or on the weekends, and it just kept us motivated because we knew what we were working towards. And then I think being good to each other as a team, sort of reflecting how we want our program to work for the kids, to inform how we treat each other as a team. And I think that keeps us really rooted.
Yeah, I think the climate, especially first and foremost, the climate in a workspace, especially as a team, is always the most important. If you can work with your team very well, then you can be capable of anything. And something else that I want to touch on is, hearing you say that you're constantly learning. I love that answer because, again, it's such a Jewish answer.
Yep.
We're always on the journey of learning. We're always trying to take things that we learn from, whether it be the Parsha of the week or some Mishnah, and see how it kind of unfolds in our real life or can show up in our real life. And that's the beauty of always learning. And another Jewish value that I realized with this whole talking about doing things for the children, doing things with the love of any child, if not your child, is also a very Jewish value. Before I had my kid, I always thought, I'm doing this, I'm learning Torah right now for me. I'm davening this morning and praying this morning for me, so I can have a good relationship with Hashem. But in reality, now that I realize my son is almost 2, and I see him picking up things that I just normally do, saying Shema, just random things, I'm just like, wow, it really wasn't all for me. I was doing all these things for him, and I was also for myself. But mainly, what do we do in Judaism? Everything is passed down in generations, and all the values and all of the lessons and stories that we learn are always passed down from generation to generation, and traditions, of course. And it's such a beautiful thing that those are 2 main things that you're doing in your work. And I commend you for that. And I really think that's really beautiful. As we start to wrap up, one last kind of hard question, what do you and Hoops for Justice feel like your biggest obstacle is that you're facing in terms of whether it's getting your brand out there, like you said, funding? How have you been able to more or less overcome that?
Yeah, I think fundraising is so difficult for us because it's in none of our backgrounds. And I'm somebody who I would never ask somebody for money. Like, I just would find a way to make it happen. And in a way, that's exactly how we've operated as an org. We have been really scrappy and resourceful. And because we value community so much, that's been our safety net, the community, right? All the orgs that are already doing incredible work, being able to connect youth to them for the services that they need has been really incredible because there's some amazing orgs doing amazing work. And we've all, as a team, like I said, we've all come out of pocket at times, and we've all found creative ways to get the resources that we need. So I think it's our biggest challenge, but also our strengths have helped us to navigate that. I don't think it's sustainable, but luckily we are getting sort of the recognition for the work that we've done that have allowed us to secure some contracts and bring some funding through the door. And now we're trying to leverage that to get the resources we need to scale.
Amazing. Yeah, at the beginning, if not the middle, being scrappy is the only way that things ever actually start moving. So basically, as we start to wrap up here, how can listeners find out more about you, Ilana Parach, more about Hoops for Justice? How can they find out more about you guys?
Yeah, so we are in the process of revamping our website, but it does exist still. It's hoopsforjustice.org with the number 4. And our contact information is on there. My contact information is on there. People can email me and ask questions if people are interested in volunteering. Another thing that we do in the juvenile halls is we bring in experts from various fields to talk about different career paths and point them to different resources and help them prepare for careers in the future. And so if people want to volunteer or come talk to the kids about what it takes to be in their field, we're always open to doing workshops like that, and that's really helpful for them. So
cool. I love that. Anything exciting coming up here in the future that you'd like to share with us for Hoops for Justice or for yourself?
Yeah, actually, one of our team members just made a film about his life. He spent 10 years while he was incarcerated working on this film. And when we saw it for the first time, we were all sobbing. It's so incredibly beautiful. And he is an incredibly beautiful person. And I imagine that it will be out soon to watch. They just won an award at South by. And I think it's going to perfectly encapsulate for people what is missing in the juvenile justice system, and give people the context that they need. So,
yeah, I love that. I would love to see that whenever it comes out. So keep us updated on that for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, songs from the hole.
Songs from the hole. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down once we jump off of here. But a couple more questions. How do you, Ilana Parach, define success? Professional, personal, spiritually, what does success look like for you?
That's a good question. Success to me, I don't know if I've spent much time thinking about that. I guess we've talked a lot about community, and I'm somebody that's really driven by community. So I think success looks like a healthy community, and it's measured by how much I'm able to contribute to it and how much of my work contributes to it. Was there a second question? What does success look like?
Yeah, it's basically what you said. What does success look like for you? And I think that's, again, a very Jewish value answer. It's the want to give and the want to be a part of something that's giving back to the world. It's beautiful. So Thank you again so much for jumping on with us. I want to wish you so much success in everything you do. May you continue to really put your best foot forward in helping the world become a better place and doing and giving back to your community around you and continuing to help the children at Hoops for Justice and any child that's needing some love in their life and to come back from if they've been in hard places, that you continue to do such beautiful work in helping them come out of that, and everything else that you aspire to do, all the success in what you do.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking with you.